Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you all to the ShipWorks and i-Parcel webinar of Demystifying International Shipping. Thank you so very much.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you all to the ShipWorks and i-Parcel webinar on Demystifying International Shipping. This is Jessica Hardicke of ShipWorks, and I'll be emceeing this today. Again, thank you for giving us some of your time. We know you all have busy schedules, so we greatly appreciate the time that you're able to spend with us today. Go ahead and diving right in. We have two speakers of the day. Mr. Jordan Welsh of i-Parcel will be speaking. Just as a quick background on Jordan, he is the Chief Marketing Officer with i-Parcel. He's one of the founders of the company and has been in the international logistics business for over 20 years. So he oversees all marketing, sales, and client services and has a key role in strategy for the company. And prior to founding i-Parcel, he helped found International Mailing Solutions. So Jordan is a true expert in shipping as well as international shipping, so it's great to have him on the call and serve as an expert. In addition to Jordan, we also have Dan Coleman of ShipWorks. Dan is on our customer care team. He's been with ShipWorks for over 2.5 years, and many of our customers have probably talked to him. So those of you who are on the call right now, you might recognize Dan's voice or name. And so he'll be doing the second portion of this presentation and just giving some tips and tricks on shipping things internationally, specifically with ShipWorks software. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Jordan.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Jessica, and thanks for that introduction. And it's good to be with you all this afternoon, sharing a little bit of insight into cross-border sales and international shipping. Just to expand a little bit, as Jessica had mentioned, my background, I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of i-Parcel. I've been in the logistics business, as she said, for over 20 years. My business partners and I all come from the international logistics business, each of us being in it for over 20 years. Besides i-Parcel, we founded and still operate two other logistics companies. One we started in 1993 called International Transport Solutions, and another we started in 1998 called International Mailing Solutions, and the primary purposes of those businesses were to transport printed matter around the world. We formed i-Parcel in 2005 and then really launched it in late 2009 with the express purpose of assisting internet retailers with cross-border sales. The value proposition of i-Parcel and the company is to provide technology solutions that localize and enhance the e-commerce shopping experience, and to provide a fully trackable logistics solution at price points far below anything that has been offered for that level of service in the past. We operate 3 distribution hubs in the United States, one in New Jersey, another one right outside of Indianapolis, Indiana, and one in LA, and then we have another hub that's just outside of London. We only sell to internet retailers, and we only deliver to consumers. So that's a little bit about us, and as a preamble, I assume that the fact that you're all on this webinar today means that you have an interest in cross-border sales and international shipping. But to further sort of whet your appetite, if you will, okay, let me just go. Okay, I want to start off with a slide, and this is a survey done by J.P. Morgan. This is in billions of dollars, and just to give you an idea of the scale and the growth of e-commerce versus U.S. and the opportunity that's there. I'm sure most of you have some kind of designs on a cross-border platform, whether you're doing it now, whether you're dabbling in it, or whether you're going full scale into it. But you can see that the opportunity that exists is great and is growing at a much greater degree than domestic e-commerce sales is. Therefore, you need to pay it the attention it's due and really to develop a strategy around it for your company. Another survey by McKinsey shows that e-commerce is projected to reach $1.3 trillion globally. A third of the world's population is online. 37% of the global online population researches products daily, and 46% of that global online population uses social media to make purchase decisions. So the opportunity is great. The challenges, I think, as we get into this, are maybe less than you might think. And one of the things that I want to try to impart on you today is some key tips that we've seen from our customers and we've had experience in to try to capture this enormous opportunity, and I've boiled them down into 5. So I'm going to start off with talking about localizing the international shopping experience. And it probably seems pretty basic to most of you that customers are more apt to buy if they're comfortable in the environment they're shopping in, whether it's a store environment or an e-commerce environment, doesn't really matter. So I'm going to try to point out some areas that we've seen with our customers, and you're seeing a mutual customer here that's been kind enough to allow us to use them as an example. This is a company called Wired Sport, which is a customer of ShipWorks and both of ours that we're in the process of implementing our technology on. And I'm going to use their website as an example to some things that you might want to consider to try to localize and enhance the local buying experience. So the first thing I'm going to suggest that we've seen work is the only way you can properly locate, make the shopper the customer comfortable in their environment is to know where they're shopping from, obviously. So one of the things that we've seen that's worked really well for a lot of our customers is to geolocate the customer by IP address. Geolocation is about 95% accurate, so there is going to be a little bit of a miss there. But for the most part, it's something where you can simply do. You can then adapt your buying experience, which I'm going to show you in a minute, to that customer's local Now I'm seeing it. Might be a delay.
I apologize to those on the call for the technical difficulties right now.
All right, let me see if I can go up one. Okay.
Sorry about that all.
Yeah, we just went past it. All right. Okay, so now we have it. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to suggest once you geolocate the shopper is we've seen a lot of customers have success with providing a welcome mat. And that welcome mat could basically display a lot of aspects about what you've done to change your site to adapt to that customer's local buying experience, such as displaying the payment methods that are available in that country, and we'll talk about that in a bit, displaying the payment currencies that you accept, and then talking about a few aspects of your site that make sense. One of the things that we've also seen that's had a lot of success is to localize the language on that actual welcome mat. Whether you localize the whole website is sort of a bigger picture issue, but localizing that welcome mat tends to work real well. So I'm going to show you that as an example in both Australia dollars, we said before, and this is localizing it as if we were a Korean shopper and providing it in their local language. We're talking about the payment methods that we would accept if that shopper was from Korea, talking about the won and the currency that would be accepted. Then from there, displaying the products in local currency. Now, whether you accept the local payment method or not is another story, and I'm going to talk about that also in a minute. But we've seen a lot of success with having the products actually displayed in the local currency. If you want to display it in both currencies, that's also something that works well. But again, that shopper wants to understand what he or she is spending in their local currency. And then I'm showing you it again in WAN as well as an example. One of the things also that the customer typically is looking for is they don't want to be surprised. And by that I mean this. They want to understand what all their costs are during the shopping experience. A lot of times what we talk to customers about, and that is internet retailers about, is providing the shipping costs and the duties and taxes up front. So there's no surprises. This affects you not only at the cart level in what the customer's understanding of the transaction is, but then again after the fact when the customer actually receives the product. If they receive the product and then the shipping company that's delivering it is going to the door, phoning them up, expecting duties and taxes, they may or may not understand what those duties and taxes are. And then you may end up having a problem after the sale, post-sale, with a return because they didn't get what they expected to, or their transaction wasn't exactly what they expected at the cart level. In addition, I'm going to show you that in WAN as well. Now the difference, if you might look here, just as a FYI, in Australia, the de minimis, or what they call, you can buy goods in Australia for up to 1,000 Aussie dollars without incurring duties and taxes, which is what makes Australia such a target-rich environment, and they're voracious consumers of e-commerce goods. But I'm using as an example, you can see in the WAN here where the duties and taxes are displayed and then the total. So the customer who's buying the snowboard here fully understand what his or her costs are all the way through and the total cost of the whole buying experience. Also, not only displaying the products in local currency and then providing all the methods, but one of the things that you should strongly consider is being able to accept local currencies and local payment methods. A lot of times the completion of that sale might not even just depend on how good your prices are or your value proposition of your product. It might depend on whether or not they have the ability to actually pay for it. In some cases, a country like, for example, Brazil, the main payment method is the boleto. If you don't offer that payment method, you might be prohibiting yourself from getting sales there. So I think one of the things we talk to internet retailers about is strongly considering what payment methods you're going to allow, what currencies you're going to allow. Certainly if you're just going to collect in US dollars and just offer a smattering of the normal payment methods, Amex, PayPal, MasterCard, and Visa, you may be restricting yourself in certain markets that you could certainly expand if you were offering additional payment methods. So again, I'm showing this in Aussie dollars, and I'm also showing the amount in WAN, just an example. Moving on from the customer experience, I want to talk about shipping costs a little bit. One of the largest factors that we see in cart abandonment has to do with high shipping costs. So one of the things that we recommend to internet retailers as they're evaluating carriers, whether it's us or whether it's anybody, is you really need to consider the service level that your customer is expecting. If you sell a product that is of relatively low value, do you need to get it to the customer in 2 to 4 days? Do you need trackable delivery? Do you need mail delivery? You need to understand the expectations because that will directly impact your customer and their willingness to buy that good. In this example, I'm showing an item of $30 and a shipping cost of $63. Obviously, if you're displaying a shipping cost to that customer, which is at half more than the actual goods you're selling it for, they're going to think strongly about how much they need that good, and there's a good chance they may abandon that order as a result. So just put yourself in their shoes, which I know everybody does, and think about really what is the service level that that customer is expecting. Do they need it there in 2 to 4 days? Is 5 to 8 days acceptable? Do they need it trackable? Do they need not trackable? And that will depend on the price points that you might want to offer from a shipping perspective to that customer. The lower you can make the shipping cost, the more value you can provide in that shipping cost, the better you're apt to complete that particular transaction. International versus domestic orders. One thing to consider is your international order process ought not to be the same as your domestic order process. A lot of times when we're talking to internet retailers, they try to pump international through the same fulfillment process that they do domestic. And oftentimes international is not set up to do the same, to have the same process associated with it as domestic orders for a couple reasons. One is the size of the package, how much air is in the box, affects international shipping a lot more than it does domestic shipping. And again, going back to the point about shipping costs and their relationship on completing a transaction, one of the things you really need to consider is, what are you going to do with your international order process? How are you going to pack those boxes? If you're an apparel shipper, can you put them in bags, which is obviously better? If you can't put them in bags, how much air are you going to allow in those boxes? What are you going to do about split shipments? A lot of times you might not know if a shipment's going to split at the time of order, and how are you going to take that into account. So one of the things I would strongly consider is, or impart to you, is really consider your international orders process separate from your domestic orders process. Another thing you want to consider, and a lot of companies are not really set up to do, is be aware of what's needed to transact internationally. Are you capturing the proper information? A lot of times when we go through a boarding process with a customer, we get into the process and the information that they have available in their e-commerce catalog is not enough to allow us to do what we need to do from an export compliance standpoint. So just a couple of tips that I would give to you. And you might want to check the way you're cataloging your process right now. Do you capture HTS codes? And HTS codes stand for Harmonized Tariff System codes. And those are the codes that are associated with each of your goods. Do you capture those on import? Do you have them? Do you have a process to capture them? Do you know the country of origin of your goods, of where your goods are manufactured? And do you multi-source goods? In other words, do you have goods from multiple areas? Because that information is needed in some way, shape, or form for international export. So you might want to consider now, whatever stage you're in of cross-border sales, of taking a look at your internal process to see if you have that information. And lastly, I'm going to suggest that you experiment with various pricing strategies. In international e-commerce, a lot of times by country it varies of what their expectation level is of what they're going to pay for the goods versus shipping costs versus duties and taxes. And I'll give you a couple of examples maybe to put that into perspective. For example, in Brazil, the same goods that people buy in Brazil here might cost double or triple as much as what they're able to get them in the States. So it might be more effective for you if you're marketing into Brazil, for example, to have a higher cost of your goods, but to reduce your shipping rate to 0, or to offer a flat shipping rate. We've seen a lot of customers have success with offering flat shipping and also bundling in some of that shipping into the merchandise value. So you really ought to consider the market that you're sending to consider what pricing strategies you might want to employ to help boost cross-border sales. And there's a lot of ways you can do this. Again, I give a couple of examples. One is bundling the shipping rate into the merchandise itself. You can up the shipping costs a little bit to certain areas. You can lower the duties and taxes. It really depends on how you want to market within that particular country. But it does vary quite a bit by destination.
Thank you, Jordan.
Okay.
That was fantastic information. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
To all of those that are on the line right now, if you do have questions, one of the things I failed to mention at the beginning is you can type in your questions there at the GoToWebinar panel on the side of your screen, and we will address those questions at the end. Jordan is going to stick around through the whole call, so he will be able to address any questions that you have as well. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Dan Coleman of ShipWorks, and he'll be talking about some shipping tips specifically for ShipWorks software.
Hello, everybody. This is Dan, and I'm sure I've probably talked to you a couple of times on the support line here, so we appreciate you joining us today. What I'm going to be doing here is kind of changing gears a little bit, and what we'll be talking about is common questions that we get asked directly within the ShipWorks software. So it may not relate directly to i-Parcel or any particular carrier in general. Some of it will, some of it won't, but it's really more about what questions we get and tips that we can offer to you when you're utilizing the ShipWorks software to ship internationally. So we're just going to go through 6 real quick tips here. Shouldn't take too long. The first thing that we mention to our customers, when you're shipping in the ShipWorks software, on the ship orders screen, there is a customs tab where you declare your customs information when processing. What we recommend most of the time is if you start on the customs tab and you declare the customs first, meaning the quantity, the description, the weight of what you're shipping for customs. One nice thing in ShipWorks is that information carries over to the service tab. So if you look at the customs tab here on screen, we have a quantity of 2, and the weight is 1 pound each. So when you enter that information and go back to the service tab where you actually specify your shipping method and all of that, that gets summed up for you. So you'll notice the weight here is 2 pounds because you declare a quantity of 2, 1 pound each, 2 pounds. We sum that up for you and the 2 match. The reason that's a good idea to do it that way is that you have to match. If we go to process this label and they don't match, we're going to get an error. So if we start on the customs tab, declare first, everything gets summed up for us on the service tab. When you hit process to get that label, it avoids those errors. Another question we get a lot is how do the international labels print? Meaning if you're using a thermal printer versus using a standard printer, what printer can I expect my labels to print to and in what form? So one thing that we mention a lot, with Indicia and Express One, if you use those services for the United States Postal Service, international customs forms and labels will print to your thermal printer when utilizing a thermal printer. So what will happen there is that you'll get, for example, with International Priority, the 4 forms that you need when shipping International Priority will print out directly to your thermal printer. They're completely usable. We have many customers that do it, but expecting that and knowing up front that that's how Indicia and Express One directly handle those forms, no surprises when they print to your thermal printer. Now the exception with Express One and Indicia are that APO, FBO, DPO military shipments will print out to your standard printer. So with most International First, International Priority, those are going to print to thermal, but they return larger forms back to ShipWorks for those military shipments, and those will print out to a standard laser or inkjet printer for you. If you use Stamps.com as your provider, it's a little different. What they do on their label servers is for all international, those customs forms will all print to your standard printer. So those won't go to your thermal. So if you're using Stamps.com, all of the forms that you need for international shipping will print out to your standard laser inkjet printer. And then UPS and FedEx are a little bit different as well. Those international labels will print to a thermal printer. And then if you need any additional forms like a commercial invoice with those will actually print to a standard regular laser or inkjet printer. We also get asked a lot what documents are going to print with our international labels. So we'll just talk about that very briefly here. USPS, International Priority, they're going to print out 4 forms. So you get 4 copies of the CP72 form. The first copy that prints out has the USPS barcode on it. Copies 2 and 3 you also include. Those are your customs forms that have to be included. And copy 4, it actually says at the bottom right corner of those documents are for your record. You can hold on to that. Now with International First, it's a little different. You expect to get just 1 copy of the CN22 form, which you use for shipping. With FedEx and UPS, you can expect 1 label, and again, those are going to print out to your standard, to your thermal printer. And then if you do say that you need a commercial invoice for any of those shipments, the commercial invoice actually prints directly to your laser or inkjet printer. So you may, if you say you need a commercial invoice, label will go to your thermal printer, the commercial invoice will go to your standard printer. We do get asked a lot about paperless invoicing as well. ShipWorks does, just so you're aware, with UPS support the ability to do paperless invoicing. So when you're on that customs tab, when you're getting ready to ship and you're configuring that shipment, Under the invoicing section, there is a checkbox that you can check to say you use paperless invoice. That tells UPS to send you a label, but all of the other invoicing, commercial invoicing that may be needed, handle those documents electronically so you don't have that additional paperwork that you need to include. Now, you can still have additional paperwork if it's required. So you can check the checkbox there to say extra documents. My shipment requires additional paper documents, and that will cause an additional commercial invoice to also print along with that particular shipping label. And the way it looks when you do paperless invoice, what you can expect on the generated label, if you notice at the bottom right corner there, it will say EDI pull. That indicates that UPS has actually handled those documents electronically. A big one that we get are address errors. We get many, many calls on, let's say you're processing an international shipment and you get a return back from the shipping provider that there's something wrong with the address. So ShipWorks doesn't directly do address validation. What we do is we rely upon the shipping provider's servers to look at the address it's shipping to, and if they see that there's a problem, they will return an error back to ShipWorks, and we display that error for you. So some of the things that we do to assist our customers when they call us and say, hey, I'm getting this address validation error, and I just can't figure out what's going on. The customer swears it's the correct address. Well, some of the tricks that we use at our end, I love Google Maps. The reason I love Google Maps is I can go to Google Maps and I can type in the address, and a lot of times Google Maps will return to me something as simple as, hey, did you mean this? Well, yeah, you know what, maybe I did mean that, so I'll try that and it works. Maybe I type in a particular postal code and it points to a particular province, but my customer had a different province in their address, so I try and correct that province. Something else that I've run into personally working with the customer, I Google mapped an address that we both thought should be correct, and it was a domestic shipment, but it happened to point me right to the middle of a Walmart parking lot. So I was kind of guessing that maybe that's not where we were really going to be delivering that package, and after doing some research, we found out the customer had actually made a typo in the street address portion, and where we were shipping literally was to the middle of a Walmart parking lot. So that didn't work out so well. So I use Google Maps a lot to simply type in the address, see what it returns to me, and it also allows me to do research, especially when I'm shipping to countries that I'm just not overly familiar with. I can get it on screen and look at the provinces, the states, the country it's going to, and that really helps for me to know how to format that address properly in ShipWorks. Another thing that we run into quite often is the address may be correct. However, some shipping providers, their servers, when we send the request to them for the labels, they don't like things like special characters. So sometimes if there's like an ampersand or a pound sign or commas in a funny place in the street address, you may get an address validation error back to ShipWorks. Another thing to look for that we run into quite often is if a customer accidentally put a leading space in front of a portion of the address, like in the postal code on screen. If there's a leading space there, the shipping provider's servers may also see that as invalid, and they'll return, postal code is incorrect. Well, it technically is correct. There just happens to be a leading space there. So I check for things a lot like those special characters. Ampersands are a big one. If there's an ampersand, pound signs, we get a lot of errors on those. And then, of course, those leading characters will help you out a lot if you can get rid of any of those you may find. And then lastly, we also get a lot of questions about shipping to U.S. territories. Which territories require customs forms and which ones don't? Well, I've listed on screen here the territories and the abbreviations in ShipWorks. And we'll talk a little bit about how the different providers look at how they want those formatted when we pass that information, that address, over to them for a label server. And it's slightly different between the United States Postal Service and what FedEx and UPS needs. So if you compare on screen here, on the left is what the United States Postal Service is looking for. So you'll notice the territory abbreviation, which is I've listed in the table above there. The territory abbreviation goes in the state/territory. So again, if you're shipping to Puerto Rico, for example, you would put PR there for Puerto Rico, but the country is going to be United States actually because it is a U.S. territory. Now if you look at FedEx on the right-hand side in UPS, territory abbreviation still goes in the same place, PR, but they actually want the territory passed as the country. So you would actually have Puerto Rico in the country. And so what that would look like on screen If you're doing it with the United States Postal Service, you'll notice PR is in the state or province and United States is in the country. But if you're shipping with either FedEx or UPS, it is slightly different. They actually want the Puerto Rico to be passed as the country. And if you don't have it that way, if you still have United States, you get an address validation error. So it's kind of good to know what those country codes are and when you need to require the country versus United States versus the actual territory that you're shipping to.
Well, thank you, Dan. I'd like to thank you for all that information to you and Jordan. To our audience, we now have a chance to go to questions and answers. Like I mentioned a little bit ago, if you have any questions, you can just submit your question on the question box that is there on your GoToWebinar panel on the side of your screen. And both Jordan and Dan will be here to answer whatever those questions are. So we'll give you a couple minutes to type in whatever questions you might have. We know we've given you a lot of information about a wide variety of international shipping. So we're sure there's some questions out there, and we'll be happy to answer. Or perhaps we've answered all the questions because I'm not seeing anyone type in a question at this point in time. So I'll give it a few more minutes and see if there are any other questions. Well, I do not see any questions coming in, so I guess that means we were extremely thorough. So that's always a good thing. So again, a huge thanks to Jordan and Dan for sharing their time with us, and to all of you for joining us today on the call. If any questions happen to come in here at the end, we will reach out to individuals personally and respond. Otherwise, we encourage you all to visit us on our website at i-Parcel.com or ShipWorks.com. and continue just to use our products. We thank you very much. Thank you for your time, and we hope you'll be able to join us for future webinars. Thank you.